Hello again. It's time for another chapter of Just a Simple Carpenter. Chapter 7. Bethlehem had already begun to swell. I remembered the little village from visits to my uncle's house a time or two when I was a lad. What I remembered could never compare to the noise and press of the crowd that greeted us as we entered the edge of town. We arrived just as the sun was dipping below the horizon, but we had no need of a torch or lantern. Merchants and innkeepers alike continued to light up the city streets, taking advantage of the carnival resulting from the enrollment decree. Mary and I tried to stop at an inn just as we came into town, but the crowd at the door surged backwards as two men burst from the entrance. "And some cousin you turned out to be, Reuben," the older of the two men shouted over his shoulder. A man with gray already peppering his beard looked out from the now freed doorway and shouted back, "Had you been the first to meet my price, Eleazar, you would have had the last two pallets in my inn." The man I assumed to be Reuben raised a craggy fist to the two men leaving the inn. Then he turned to the crowd and said, "And as for the rest of you, be on your way. There are no more beds to be had here." Eleazar and his companion passed by, grumbling to each other. "We're better off not staying in this high-priced dump. Reuben's linens are infested with fleas anyway. Perhaps there are other inns who still have space." I looked at Mary. Her eyes were tired, but she smiled at me from her seat upon the donkey. I knew that she was weary from the traveling. I also knew that we must find a place to stay the night soon, or the baby might come without a place to lay his head. We approached our fourth inn of the evening, almost ready to give up all hope and sleep under the stars yet one more time. "Wait here," I told Mary, leaving her to rest on the beautiful small pool and fountain in the courtyard of the tiny inn. Turning to approach the door, I saw a little man with very little hair emerge from the lamp-lit common room. The sign, freshly painted, hung from his hand. I saw that the sign said, "No room." He stopped me before I could turn to leave. His name was Leonard. How can I ever forget the kindness he showed me and my little family that night? With every available inch of his hostel rented, he sent his servant to prepare a small corner of the stable at the back of the house. While he made these arrangements, we met Sarah, his wife. Sarah, as kindly as Leonard had welcomed us to stay, began welcoming us to leave. "We're just too packed tonight. Come back in a day or two, and maybe we will have a space. As for now, perhaps Lemuel down the street." We heard no more about Lemuel because Leonard shooed his wife away and led us to the stable where he and, yes, Sarah made us as comfortable as possible. Sarah did not express great happiness at our staying, but she acquiesced to her husband's wishes. I thought she might throw objects at both Leonard and me when he refused to accept the payment I offered for the lodging. "How can I charge money for a barn stall?" he had said. And then Sarah opened her mouth to protest. But Leonard raised his hand and said, "We cannot, my dear. Don't you see the condition of this young woman? Can you not recall how you tired so quickly? And maybe God will honor our home with the birth of a man-child." They left us to try to get some sleep. Sleep eluded us greatly that night, though. At first, the noise of the household animals, augmented by the stable-yard clamor of guests' animals, including our own wretched donkey, kept the Sandman at bay. Then, when it seemed the animals had quieted for the night, the street racket which had accompanied the swelling population of the village disturbed our minds. Finally, when I felt it was safe to lay my head on the straw pillow I had fashioned, Mary began to cry out, "Oh!" "Mary, what is it?" I whispered hoarsely. "Joseph, I think it is time," she choked out through clenched teeth. "Mary, oh Mary." "Now?" I asked. "Yes, now," she screamed. "Go now and get Sarah." Her breath seemed to be coming in short gasps now, and sweat formed on her brow. "Now, Joseph," she managed to say again between clenched teeth. Gathering my wits, I ran and summoned Leonard and Sarah from their bed. I didn't have to be told twice. Running back to the stable, Sarah began administering aid to my wife as if she were a practiced midwife. In a quiet moment between Mary's birth pains, Sarah happened to look up and see Leonard and me standing there like fish out of water. "You, father," she said to me sharply, "go and make a bed of that manger. This baby will need some place to sleep when he arrives." Turning to her husband, she scolded, "And you, the innkeeper who gives away lodging, bring me some soft cloths from our rooms. This baby is ready to be born, and the men stand around like trees blowing in the wind." By the time I finished my task, I saw that Leonard was back with the cloths, and then I heard the noise. No longer was it the noise of barnyard or caravan animals. No longer was it the cacophony of rowdy travelers. But now it was the sweet song of fresh lungs singing unto God, "I am born. I am here. I am." "Listen," Leonard said to me. "There is no more precious sound than the first cries of a newborn son." A tear came to the old innkeeper's eye. "Forgive me, Joseph," he said, "but I have longed for the moment when this house would hear just that sound. You see, 20 years ago, Sarah and I were awaiting the birth of our first child. I knew without a doubt that God would grant my prayer for a son, and then a shadow of bitterness and anger crept onto the brow of this man who had shown only kindness and mercy to Mary and me. And then the thoughtless act of one I can no longer name brought about the destruction of my firstborn along with my happiness. Sarah was no longer able to have children after the shepherds drove a throng of excited sheep right into our courtyard as a joke. My wife was knocked off her feet, and while she survived the trampling, our son was stillborn within 3 days of the accident." His voice trailed off, and I felt his sorrow. It had settled deeply within his heart, had taken root there. It was this incident I saw that had magnified his compassion to me, a poor road-worn traveler leading a donkey that carried my young wife, who was great with child. I could not have expected that God would use a 20-year-old incident to keep his son from being born out of doors. But then I had not expected God to speak to both Mary and me through angels, ensuring the baby would have a family to provide for his needs as he grew. After a moment, the glint returned to Leonard's eye, and he said, "But this is not a time to remember the sadness of so many years ago. It is a time to celebrate. Let us look at the beautiful son your wife has given you."